Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 377 for Monday, November 24th, 2025. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcast platforms, including a video version that goes out on YouTube and Spotify. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Johnny, but the internet knows me as Pixel Riffs, and joining me from the world of film and TV, it's Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
Hello, it's the film of weird TV and weird film. We were talking about Frankenstein, talking about Pluribus, talking about Severance. There's all kinds of weird stuff online right now. And Stranger Things is coming back soon. So more fancy fantasy to look forward to in the near future. And if you like that kind of thing, then you get to hear about it on the Render Distance if you are a patron of the Spawn Chunks. And that's patreon.com/the Spawn Chunks. I know you're shocked. That is where our patrons get to hang out with us before and after each show. We do extra 20 to 30 minutes of content every single week. And we talk about Minecraft sometimes, but we also talk about things that might inspire our builds or other shows that we're into, or tabletop games like Johnny was talking about this week as well. And we also do things like the monthly Minecraft Hangout with our patrons. That's coming up on Saturday, November 29th. Usually we record those at 10 a.m. Atlantic or 2 p.m. in the UK. Same recording time as our live show, just on a Saturday. And that's where our patrons hang out with us and show us what they've been up to in Minecraft. And we talk about it for about a half an hour to an hour every single month. It's great. So once again, that is over at patreon.com/the Spawn Chunks.
Yes, coming up on our schedule, we are going to be doing some extra holiday recordings because we usually like to take a couple of weeks off around the holidays since that's coming up. So bear in mind that over the next little while, we might have pre-recorded episodes a little bit early, so we might not be like right on top of the latest news, but this week we're talking about not just one but two Mounts of Mayhem pre-releases, so it seems like the news is racing forward to catch up to us. Before we get into the news though, we like to do our quick login and talk about what's new in our Minecraft lives. So Joel, kick us off. What's new on the Citadel?
Well, I promise you there have been changes, even though there might not look like there's been much. But I've been adjusting and filling in the panels of the wings of the command center on the Mushroom Island, going back and forth, as I mentioned last week, between the north wing and the east wing to kind of A/B test different design ideas. And one of the things I did that took a while was changing the width of the tip of the wings. So I've knocked them down by 6 blocks, 3 blocks on each side. It looks a lot better. It feels a lot less boxy. It gives it a little bit more of a taper. It looks a little bit more like the Inspiration concept art as well. But in the process, I had to move most of the wall in by at least a block. So like every 10 or 12 blocks, the build gets more and more narrow. That affected the design that I had on the side of it. The orange stripe that I really liked last week, it lost a little bit of its effectiveness depending on where it was on the wings. So I had to like move that around and kind of experiment with different stuff. Changed out a lot of materials as well. I've now committed to things like deep slate on the inside, tough for mostly the end. We've got polished diorite on the inside, the inside of the plus sign, so the closer to the center section. And then I've also got some terracotta and orange terracotta in the stripe. So all of the different versions of stones that I can, I'm using the polished version because it has that nice square outline and it sort of looks like metal paneling. And then I've thrown in the numbers in different colors. And so it's not quite 100%. I've achieved a decent palette. I think I've got a good pattern for the wing itself, but things like lighting details, paint, decals, that kind of thing, I haven't really sorted out. Same thing with the base. I'm flipping back and forth between two different designs of the main bay entrance, and there's one for every cardinal direction, north, south, east, and west. And so every time I build one, I'm just changing it up a little bit. And I think I'm going to try to add some more color down there because it's kind of dark. Obviously, need some more lighting, but those are the kind of things that I'm trying not to get caught up in right now, because it's more important to like get the materials and the shapes ready, because if I start adding lights, then whenever I change something, I have to move the lights, and so it just becomes a whole thing. So I'm trying to just do broad shape passes for now, and at some point I have to figure out what I'm going to do with the ground, because I have not figured out whether I'm going to do roads, whether I'm going to do some sort of like circuit board type thing. Like I'd like it to be super futuristic, but the more that I spend running around on the Mushroom Island, the more it kind of feels like the tech has been landed on some sort of like deserted island or deserted moon or something. So I'm not sure where I'm leaning. I don't have a name for the area yet. I'm just kind of like playing around, but for the most part, it's about finishing up these designs, because once I have the designs done, I can rotate around and do the other wings, and it'll give me a much better idea about how it's all filling in. And that's the other thing that I did was I filled in the middle. It's temporary. It's just stone. It's not going to be that color. It's not going to be that flat. One of the nice things about doing it, though, it does give a feeling of mass to the building, but it also immediately flagged, this is too flat. Like I need way more depth. I need way more contrast. I think a lot of it's going to be much darker. I might be using a lot more deep slate or even other darker blocks like black concrete or something in there. And having some lights or vents or something. I haven't really figured all that out yet, but for now it's coming together. Like I'm feeling pretty confident with it. It is just really slow going because for the most part, I've been going back and forth with a happy gas, which is great for those vertical changes, switching out a couple of blocks. But then when you've got to go back and fly over to the other one, it takes an eon to go from one of these to the other. Because I don't know off the top of my head how far they are apart, but it's going to be 40 or 60 blocks, as you're traveling, depending on how far you are out to the tip. And it just takes a long, long time. There's like, you can hear the Jeopardy music playing in your head, when you go. So I looked back over the week. It's like, how did this take me all week? Like it was 3-hour streams every day. Oh, right. I'm flying a happy gas around doing this. So it's handy for being up high and stuff, but it is really tricky when you're trying to move from one place to the other. It almost feels like it would be worth it to have like a happy gas on each wing so that I could just jump off of one, fly over the other and jump on it. But the problem is, and this is something that I discovered and was talking about with my chat, is that one of the things I wish that they did behaviorally was when you're using them to build and you get off of them, I wish they would stay still. I understand that they want them to move around and they want them to feel alive, but the moment that you jump off of them, they leave and leave at quite a distance. I think it would be great if they just kind of hovered for like, I don't know, 30 seconds, just long enough that you could like jump off, get the blocks that have dropped, or jump off and do something quick that you couldn't reach and then jump back on again. Like if they didn't take off running the moment that you got off of them, I think that would be a little bit more useful.
Yeah, I've discovered the same thing with the Happy Ghast, and I think a lot of it is down to the fact that they don't like to come down to the ground too much because, of course, they can't pathfind through solid blocks, and the Happy Ghast's hitbox sort of, I think, covers the main sort of head of it, but you sort of get the sense that they don't like to come low down enough that the tentacles are clipping through the ground either.
Right.
And so unless you're building on something where you can kind of perch on the top of it and there's space kind of around you and below you that the Happy Ghast can fly through, they don't really come down to like a reachable level very often unless you've got a snowball out. Like more often than not, I find myself using a firework to get up to the Happy Ghast and then fly it around from there. And that doesn't necessarily feel like a great experience. So yeah, I think that's one of the a lot of people's feedback about the Happy Ghast is the fact that because they're flying mobs, they want to spend a lot of time just cruising through the empty air. And all the empty air is above you 5 or 6 blocks off the ground most of the time, so they're not colliding with nearby little, changes in terrain and that kind of thing. But moving the conversation back to the build, of course, I think it's looking much more refined, and I think that's what you've been doing a lot of this week, right? Is refinement, yeah. And so I think, the way the sides of this taper in looks really effective. And in one of the screenshots where it looks a little bit more complete, I'll throw that up on the video version for anybody watching this. I love the fact that next to the hangar bay entrance, you've got these little modules of what look like kind of 2x2 polished diorite cubes. And that reminds me, you've played a fair bit of No Man's Sky, and I imagine Satisfactory has a kind of similar aesthetic, where there's almost like washing machine style, like storage bay blocks that you can put down, and that's like where a lot of the item storage happens. And I think that's what those remind me of, kind of simulating that sort of, there's going to be outdoor storage for some of the stuff they don't want to go all the way back into the base to collect, and stuff that's, it's easier to store it outside or more appropriate to store it outside. And just having the impression of that, it being sort of implied that there's some kind of modular thing out there or some instruments taking readings from the atmosphere or something like that, goes a long way for the overall kind of silhouette of this, to make sure that it isn't just a series of flat lines at ground level as well. And I think little details like that are really what's selling me on the sci-fi image of this in general.
Thanks, man. That's actually a happy accident. I was just looking to do like a different pattern of the edge of the build, trying to figure out what to do on that section, because the mid section is very much incomplete. Like as you can see from the screenshots, like it's different on one side than it is on the other, because I've been going back and forth with different ideas. But one thing I remembered was something that Scar did a couple of seasons ago in Hermitcraft, where he was doing landscaping for Mumbo Jumbo, where he did oversized blocks. Like he made like a
Yeah.
rocky shore, but
Yeah.
instead of trying to make it look realistic, he made it look like Minecraft. And so instead of just using the meter by meter blocks, he was doing like 2x2 and 3x3 and 5x5 chunks. And it looked really cool. It looked like it was part of Minecraft. And one of the things I was talking about on stream this week was leaning into Minecraft as sci-fi, as opposed to trying to make sci-fi out of Minecraft. Like, what if Minecraft was sci-fi? So things are going to be square on the end. Things are going to be blocky. The terrain, it's alien terrain, so I can make it look like whatever I want. Like maybe these mineral crystals in the surrounding area do form in these giant blocks. Like that would be really kind of fun. And I mean, like, if you don't mind me saying so, a little easy to do in Minecraft. You know, I think it would be very effective. But in doing that, it might also fit the world better in terms of the game. And so I think I might play around with that more, because some of the design changes I was making, I was working in some stairs and slabs here and there on these wings of the command center. And in some cases, especially on the tip of the wing, where it looks like a fuselage or a bit like an aircraft carrier kind of look, it looks better with blocks and less stairs in some places, because it feels chunkier. It feels more Minecrafty and less like I'm trying to emulate something in Minecraft and can't quite get there. More like, well, this is a Minecraft sci-fi build, so it's going to be chunky and heavy and thick. And so I think I might try to take that lesson and lean into that on the inside parts of those designs, and maybe have some pillars or feet or things that are just 5x5 cubes or 4x4 cubes, or like whatever suits the scale. So I'm going to try to play around with that a little bit more this week as I hone things in. But I'm really anxious to get, not anxious, but I'm excited to get the panels finalized, and so I can just wrap that around and not have a lot of design decision to make in a stream. Like it'd be nice just like, all right, we're just counting and copying.
Yeah, I found that was the case when I started making roofs out of blocks as well. And that was one of those things that you want the roof to be like as close to a slope as possible, because we're used to like tile roofs being angled. And so you often want to make things out of the like closest thing to approximate that angle, which ends up being stairs. But then you don't have as much freedom to mess around with materials, because you're stuck with the, you know, the block types that have stairs to begin with. And also when it comes to like whether it's a roof gradient like the stuff I've been building in the survival guide, or whether it's just like a different type of material you want to use, it often feels like you have a little bit more control over the pitch of a roof if you're using blocks and slabs. And more often than not, those are materials that can blend together very easily, like planks or natural stone or something like that. So you don't see the joins as much. And I think stairs are one of those things that they feel like a trap to fall into after a certain point, where they're great for sort of finer detail and certain types of shapes. But then if you're trying to build something at larger scale, it's going to be a lot harder to make it look like the scale really works when it has all of these finer details to it, when it's also surrounded by blocky terrain and blocky creatures and everything else.
Yeah, I find the stairs work better over the arches of the doors, because they're closer to the ground. That level of detail close up makes sense.
Yeah.
But also those blocks are not the polished versions, so they don't have the inside edge of the stair isn't visible. Like it just all seems like one big chunk, and almost gives you the ability to have like an angle in Minecraft. Whereas when you put the stairs in polished tuff, polished diorite, whatever that happens to be, you can see that it's clearly a different shape than everything else. Like the panel is just like a different shape, and it doesn't blend in as well. So that might be something I try to lean into a little bit more, and try to use stairs in situations where there's no seams. One of the things I'd like to do is add some color to the doors, and I might be using red sandstone to match with the orange of the terracotta in the stripes. And if I do that, then again, it's a block that gives me stairs and slabs seamlessly, because it's the smooth version. And that would allow me to have like thinner lines of colors, and not have to just be reliant on things like concrete, which is just a big straight block all the time, right?
Definitely, yeah. But this is coming along really well. It's really great to see this sort of coming together piece by piece. And I imagine now that you've done a couple of the wings in this and you're happier with the refinements, the rest of it will sort of come along a lot easier. It's like you just have to repeat the pattern at this point, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what have you been doing? More David digging and pattern repeating on your side too?
Yes, the repeated patterns are definitely coming to bear. I managed to get through probably about 4 or 5 layers worth on the y-axis of this beacon mine every time I stream, so I'm still digging. I will probably keep the zombie spawners. I've decided that I'm going to try and work out how I can convert them into drowned, and if drowned reinforcements are still a thing, just for the technical exercise of it, but still digging away all of these different layers means that A, I will have the space around it to design the farm however I want to, and so I don't end up with the drowned that I'm trying to spawn as reinforcements spawning in, nearby caves or something like that, right? I can at least have a bit more control over the surroundings. And secondly, I want to maybe I want to give myself the option to get rid of the spawners later if I decide that that part of the farm isn't good enough, and I have plenty of time to dig out the other areas that I would want to dig out for the full-size contraption and work on the zombie farm in the background, and then decide, okay, do I just want to get rid of this farm now that I've proven or disproven the fact that it's worthwhile as a source of copper, and then I can just build the rest of the redstone copper aging contraption in that space anyway. So we'll see. We'll see which way that falls. But in the meantime, that's fairly slow going, and I wanted to have something else going on in the Survival Guide world. So I made a portal to the Nether Roof for the first time in this series, and
Wow.
it's we're over 100 episodes into the series at this point. I can't remember when I've introduced it in previous seasons, but I've been a bit more reluctant to include the Nether Roof this time around. I like doing stuff in the Nether Cavern just because there is scenery around, and it feels like more of like leaving your mark on the environment in the same way that you do the overworld. And so I've been going back and forth about whether or not I should include this, and eventually decided that I would do like a solid few, like a little mini series within the Survival Guide of like game-breaking mechanics. So getting to the Nether Roof, breaking bedrock, probably the trick where you can manipulate end gateways to spawn out in the void wherever you want to, TNT duplication, and bits and pieces like that. But the main reason I'm including this is not necessarily because it's my preferred gameplay style, but because I recognize that what I'm doing is making a tutorial series, and I kind of want to respect players following along with the series who don't have as much raw time as I have to get into Minecraft and spawn-proof or clear nether terrain in order to make something like a gold farm. And so, naturally, I might build a gold farm on the Nether Roof, and then I might build another one over an appropriately sized lava lake in the Nether Cavern somewhere. And I think I've flown past a couple of really good candidates. So I would like to do that at some stage, do what you've done with, like, the Donut Gold Farm inside the Nether, or work on a different gold farm design, perhaps. But yeah, either way, I made a portal to the Nether Roof, and the main thing that presented as far as a challenge was, how do I incorporate portals of a certain height in areas where I would want them to be, portals back from the Nether Roof to the overworld? And so what I did, what I can share as far as screenshots for the live show chat, and I'll have some better ones for the show notes and the video, is that I designed a portal that was going to go between the two towers of the gateway that I built at the Windy City. And initially I wanted this to be like between the two towers, and there were like maybe chains kind of attaching it to the roof as though it was suspended. And the design I landed on, and the area that the portal looked best, I decided to go a different direction with it. So what it is now is it's surrounded by this sort of copper, like 4-pointed star shape that I made with the copper gradient, because I wanted to include that somewhere in there, especially since this area is becoming more and more associated with copper in my mind, thanks to the scale of this copper aging project. But I've done that, and I've done my favorite thing to do with any kind of, it's floating mystically, which is put conduits around it. So it now has conduits with lightning rods coming off at each angle of the conduit, so it looks like they are some sort of mystical apparatus that's supporting it in place between these two gateways. And that got around the weird geometry of the points on the roofs not quite lining up with the portal, and then either chains or iron bars didn't quite have enough room to look like they had a proper kind of, natural droop to them, and you can't really do that with chains anyway because they have to be straight. So I just got around all of that by redesigning what I thought was going to be the mechanism keeping the portal afloat, and making it a little bit more fantastical instead of grounding it in reality too much. But yeah, I'll have a proper screenshot of that in context with the Windy City for the video, so hopefully you can kind of see what I'm getting at that point.
It's funny that you mentioned the chains and the drooping, because I just watched a couple of videos recently that had that as well, and you really do have to make a choice. Like, you've got iron bars that you can go up and down with, but they don't look like real chains would. And then you've got chains in Minecraft that look great, but they only go either horizontal or vertical.
Yeah.
And so you're stuck with either having something above or below it to fasten it to, or directly to the side. So you can't do any kind of angle, which is too bad, because I think that it could look really cool if that was, like you said, floating but then tethered. Like as if it was being kept down within reach by something fastening itself to the buildings, and that's really cool. I mean, one thing you could try, I'm not sure if you're going to go with any magic or any kind of things like that, but you could also do some sort of like glass or glass pane things that are like swirling around it, but then also look like that they're emanating from the building. That could be one solution to try to keep it, I guess, fixed in space. But I like the look of it. Like I don't often see nether portals just floating in the air. Like it's not a common thing, because usually people want easier access to them. And I think it looks good. I like the idea of the conduits too. And of course, using the gradient and stuff is really cool, because the colors of copper complement the purple of the portal so well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like that it's not even round. Like it's like a jewel shape. It's like it almost looks like a Minecraft diamond in terms of like the vanilla shape for the Minecraft diamond. Like it almost looks like that.
Yeah, or like a throwing star or something like that. It's got that kind of like pointed kind of shape.
Oh, the outside of it. Yeah, I was talking about the hole. And the portal shape. Yeah,
it's got that kind of emerald silhouette to the portal itself. Yeah, mainly just wanting to like obscure the obsidian frame and make it feel a little bit different.
Of course. But,
yeah. No, the outside of the portal was kind of like an afterthought, but then in the end I decided, yeah, that really works for me. And the other one I've done back at my spawn build is in the mountain, the sort of cherry mountain that I've always had as the background of that area. It's in like a cave just above like a waterfall, and I think you and I were talking about like building the bat cave in Minecraft at some point, and so I thought this being behind the waterfall, or at least where the waterfall emerges from, feels like kind of a neat way of having that. But the mountain is obviously so tall that naturally anything I build that high up is going to be linking to the sort of above Y128 coordinate that you ideally want if you've got other portals inside the nether cavern and you're trying to link something to the nether roof. So yeah, I'm going to tinker with that. I'm expecting to use the nether roof as more of like a technical area than like a build area. I'm not going to build like a sort of elaborate thing up there really, but we'll see where that idea takes me, because if it's well received by my community and people are happy to see more from the nether roof, then I might do other stuff with it in future. For now, though, we're going to move on into the news for this week, because we have pre-releases to cover. This is Minecraft Java Edition 1.21.11 pre-release 1. Of course, the first pre-release for the Mounts of Mayhem drop. The first one was published November 18th, 2025, with the main changes being added a new graphical option, texture filtering. This controls the method used to sample textures when they're viewed at an angle or from a distance. The available values are none, RGSS, and anisotropic. RGSS stands for Rotated Grid Supersampling and is a shader-based filtering method that improves texture clarity at a moderate performance cost that should be available on all hardware. Anisotropic is a hardware-based filtering method that provides the best texture clarity, and the maximum values of it are 2x, 4x, and 8x, which is controllable by a separate slider. If your hardware doesn't support it, however, anisotropic filtering will do nothing, and they do note that it comes with a significant impact on video memory usage, especially when combined with a high mipmap count. On a slightly less technical note, there are a few tweaks to the spear weapon. Golden spears are now considered a preferred weapon by piglins. You can now continue to deal damage to the target if you keep charging at it after the initial hit, and mobs can do the same. Skeleton variants and drowned can no longer pick up spears. Zombified piglins now also know how to charge with a spear. Be afraid. Be very afraid. Spears are now placed after swords in the creative inventory, and the Mob Kebab advancement is no longer classified as a challenge advancement. The heads of Nautilus and Zombie Nautilus also now clip less through their shells. Technical changes: the datapack version is now 94, which provides a few new changes to item components supporting this new attack range component, and the resource pack version is now 75, which includes some updates to item sprites, textures, and sounds for the Nautilus mob. Fixed bugs of note in this pre-release: leather horse armor and leggings and helmet parts were untextured previously. The attack indicator did not respect Spear's reach. Nautilus shell drop chance from Nautili was unaffected by looting, and you could get the Mob Kebab advancement by hitting an Ender Dragon 5 times in a row with the same charge attack. The dragon has a pretty big hitbox. Those have all now been fixed, along with a bunch of other technical fixes that you can find in the Minecraft.net changelog. Moving on to pre-release 2, which was published November 21st. The major change here, when the see-through leaves video setting is disabled, what used to be called fast leaves, the gaps between leaves are now dark green instead of black. Turning the see-through leaves video setting off now gives a bigger performance boost than before. Some more fixed bugs of note in this pre-release. The sound made by attempting to open a locked chest could not be heard by other players. There was a crash when loading the game without an options.txt file present, and non-see-through leaves looking different compared to the previous snapshot. Those have all been fixed along with a handful of others, and for the full details of technical changes and bug fixes, or if you just want to read it for yourself, you can find the changelogs either at minecraft.net or we'll link them in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
So it sounds like we're going to be getting the Mounts of Mayhem drop sooner than later. And I would guess, as I think you would also guess, early December?
Yes. The next coming Tuesdays are the 2nd and the 9th. So I would assume it's going to be one of those two. I would probably say the 9th just so they give themselves a bit of a window for a release candidate. But we could be getting one of those this week if the pre-releases have gone well for them. So I'm not sure what date they're targeting, but either of those sounds plausible to me.
Gives them time to take care of any hot fixes or bugs that really need to get taken care of before the development team goes on holiday break, right? So
yeah,
you don't want to go too close to the holidays because then it would be tricky. I feel like, I guess it was maybe the 3rd or the 6th. No, was it the 7th last year for the
I think it was somewhere in between for the Garden Awakens, right? It was somewhere in that sort of first week range. So yeah, like it was, honestly, December has crept up on me in general, so I was actually kind of surprised to hear about pre-releases. I thought, wow, that feels very soon, but yeah, like I guess because they were trying to publish in the first week of December, it sort of made sense. So yeah, I'm excited to see both this and also presumably we get an update on what's next once everyone's back from winter holidays. But I'm genuinely kind of interested in what they've got coming up after Mounts of Mayhem at this point.
Yeah, Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024.
Yeah. So December 2nd seems perfectly feasible given that timeline, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it all sounds like it's coming together. Given golden spears to piglins as a preferred weapon, I think is a nice flavor touch. You mentioned, I think, a lot of other people that I saw reviewing the spears when they first came out and first started getting in the hands of piglins, that the golden spear really makes sense for them, and it looks good, and it works with the lore that we know of for the piglins, and it's a nice flavor touch as far as I'm concerned. Really makes a lot of sense if they're dealing with hunting hoglins, right? Like that's not, I wouldn't want to hunt a hoglin with anything shorter than a spear. is basically how I would look at that. And I think it feels pretty appropriate visually. And then the other things that I noticed were like the texture filtering options and video settings. That makes a lot of sense. I think it's great that they're just not going to be an option for people where your hardware can't handle it, so it's not going to be confusing. But then if you do have hardware that can handle it significantly, then you could see performance increases, which I don't want to understate. I feel like there has been a significant amount of performance increase over the last 6 months or so, and probably before that, but maybe I wasn't noticing. But ever since I switched to shaders, now granted, I've also moved to a brand new area on the server where there's really not much going on. There's not a lot of armor stands or trapdoors coming out my ears as there are in Westhill, so there's less to render. But I can play with shaders, and I never used to. I only get about 35, 40 frames a second, not the 60 that I want. But when I turn shaders off, I'm getting 180 frames a second, which I've never seen on my machine, and I've not upgraded my hardware in 6 years. So I feel like the graphical improvements that they're making behind the scenes are not to be overlooked. I think it's a great improvement. I think it makes Minecraft more enjoyable for people on longer lasting machines. You don't, if Minecraft is your main game, you don't have to upgrade your hardware nearly as often as you used to.
Yeah, I think it's really great, and I'm not certain if they are doing this incrementally, where they're talking about putting rendering on a separate CPU thread, or if that's just going to happen all in one go once they've started to separate out all of these visual options. But I think having the fine-tuned control either way in the meantime means that players are going to have the experience that they want at much less resource load for their machine. And speaking of that, I think one of the interesting changes from the second pre-release is that fast leaves, as we used to call them, the see-through leaves now, are no longer see-through. They are no longer that weird sort of black fill-in color. Like the colors seem to actually match the leaves a lot better, and genuinely trees on that graphics setting don't look all that different from leaves, like especially when viewed from a distance on fancy graphics where they are more transparent. So I think overall, players who have to rely on some of the lower graphic settings are going to find that a really aesthetically pleasing change compared to how leaves used to look.
Yeah, I saw that too. I thought they looked really good. I remember early on when I was playing on an old MacBook, and I had to run the simple leaves in order to in order to get by, and I refused. I took the lower frame rate because it looked so bad. I was just like, no, I don't want black in between where the leaves are supposed to have holes in them, as we see them with most players now. But I mean, gosh, how far we've come now that if you have a machine that can run it, you've got falling leaves and all kinds of different things happening. Particles from spore blossoms and all that is also just a really nice touch. I take for granted the amount of spore particle animation that's happening around me in the Mushroom Island. It's everywhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of like little details like that, even before we get vibrant visuals on Java Edition as well. So we'll see how that goes in the future. For now, we're going to move on into chunk mail. If you'd like to email the show, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com, and you can expect an extra mailbag episode as we dive into some emails around the Christmas period and make up for the fact that we're not going to have any news over one of our pre-recorded episodes. So we would love to hear from you. Please keep your emails short and on point. It really does help us include them in the show more easily. And if you're a patron of the show, if you support us at patreon.com/thespawnchunks, let us know in the subject line, and we'd love to read some patron emails as well. This week, Joel is going to read this first one.
This email comes in from Scooter92, a simple solution for chairs. Hi, Pix and Joel. I was just listening to episode 376 and your discussion about the lack of chairs and other furniture options in vanilla Minecraft. I had an idea for how chairs could be implemented while still allowing for player creativity in furniture design. What if Mojang added stools to Minecraft? These could be 1-block sized seats for players and would allow the functionality of sitting down, but the model would be simple and small enough that we could still, quote unquote, build a chair by adding the usual signs and trapdoors and shelves to customize the look. This could help get around the awkwardness of positioning a minecart as a seat and building around that. Curious to hear your thoughts. Thanks again for such a great podcast. Scooter92 was killed by back pain because he was older than 30 and couldn't find anywhere comfy to sit down.
You're speaking our language, Scooter. Well done. Well done at pitching that to definitely over 30-year-olds.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm just realizing now that unless it's a minecart or a mount, you don't really sit down in Minecraft. I guess a boat will be the next best thing.
Yeah.
But as a player, as a avatar in the game, how often do you actually, unless you're going somewhere, get in a minecart or a boat, right? Like most of the time you're walking or running. I guess the only relief to your feet is flying around with Elytra, but then you still got to land. So like you're on your feet almost constantly when you're playing this game, which is true of any video game, I guess. But yeah, it's wild to think about like the amount of blocks that you travel. Like how many kilometers have we both walked just building in Minecraft?
Yeah, not to mention the fact that you only get to sleep for about like 3 or 4 seconds before suddenly it's daytime again. I mean, when is Steve getting any rest, even the happy ghasts and the horses. Yeah, I don't know. There's an interesting case to be made for sitting down and taking it easy in Minecraft. And I think the thing that stuck out to both of us, just judging by like what we've written about this email, is that the idea of having components for furniture is the most appealing part of this to me. Like, I think it feels more Minecrafty to do that because it's closer to the system we have already, where you're supposed to use your own creativity and ingenuity to come up with something that approximates furniture, aesthetically speaking. And I like the idea of having some sort of surface that you can sit down on, whether it's modeled as a stool or something else, but then having the rest of the kit that we already use to make stuff look like furniture be part and parcel of that. So it doesn't feel like you're necessarily removing all of the quote unquote like limitations breed creativity mindset that goes into the way they've justified not adding formal furniture to the game already.
Yeah, I would say I would agree with all that, and then add that I think the stool should be less than a block, because otherwise your stool and your tables are going to be the same height. So like
Yeah.
a stool should probably be more like a slab size, in the same way that a bed is less than half a block, I think, or around a half a block. That kind of stuff would make more sense. And I like the idea of having like a stool and then like a chair back, or how do you add chair arms? Like what other things could you use to do that? And it does kind of open up that uh, waterfall of like, well, if you have an oak stool, then you have to have a stool in like every wood type. And then if you have a stool in every wood type, do you have a chair back in every wood type? And on one hand, that does start to get cumbersome. But on the other, if it's meant to be something that can be used as a chair back, but could be also used as other things, similar to how the shelf is being used right now in a lot of decoration around in Minecraft. I feel like those chair backs could be also used for fences or little things that you might not be able to think of immediately, just because it might be called a chair back, or it might be called, I'm not sure what you could call it. A stool I think would be fine being called a stool. But if you had some other furniture pieces, I'm not sure what you could call them that would make them at least be inspired to be used for other things. Like I think about a lectern that's used quite often, depending on the scale of your build, as like a railing. And I think that stools as a railing or chair backs as a railing could be really fun. I went beyond that and started thinking about tables. It would be cool if you had like table legs and table tops. If you had a pedestal or four legs, like maybe you would have an option. And then thinking about different tabletops, similar to how we've got fence posts and pressure plates in villages that simulate tables. Well, if you could do a different tabletop material in some sort of table construction in Minecraft, that would work great for getting out of the medieval style, right? Like you could still have a wooden table leg, but what if you could have a quartz table leg or an obsidian table leg with a quartz top? Like all of a sudden you can do some really modern looking stuff for people that want to build cities or mansions or whatever, and not have to rely on texture packs to give you things that look like more modern materials or modern aesthetic in Minecraft. And I think it would open up a lot of creativity, especially as Scooter92 said, coming in segments. I think that delivering that kind of stuff in segments would be fantastic, because it reminds me of Lego. Like it reminds me of the kind of stuff that you get in Lego, where you can build chairs or where you can build couches and things out of multiple blocks, and not just have to rely on a Lego chair being delivered. But in some cases, just like Minecraft, Lego has to make something that looks like a flower pot or looks like a flower, and is really only going to have one function. But I think that it's a brilliant idea to be able to use it in different ways, and I'm curious as to what could be done, especially if you get into something like a drawer, where like a single drawer could be inserted into builds. It could be very functional. It could be part of the redstone community. But then if you started stacking drawers on top of one another, all of a sudden you've got dressers, right? Like you've got something that's 3 blocks tall that has functional storage, but then looks like it's part of furniture that we're all familiar with. And I think that kind of stuff would go a long way to helping Minecraft interior design for sure.
Yeah. Like my preference is definitely towards the modular side of things, and definitely towards anything that can be used in creative ways. Like you said, like the lecterns used as railings, like stuff like that is always kind of helpful to skew things in different directions, so it doesn't just feel like modern or just feel like fantasy. It can kind of be all kinds of things. I think I've been considering a lot of this, and I think a lot of the way I've seen furniture mods implemented is obviously like quite an effort, and the same goes even for the stuff that sort of trips into more data pack territory. Like it seems like something that if Mojang themselves implemented it, it would be very easy to have a very broad scope creep, because it's not just about how many furniture pieces are added, and of course, like if we do it in one wood type, we have to do it in all wood types, and probably also all wood types in perpetuity if they decide to add more. But I think it's also about how much the existing game needs to change in order to accommodate it. And my chief example for that is structures, because how many village houses have tables made out of like a fence with a pressure plate on top, right? And then probably 2 stairs either side of it as seats. And did we change village houses to include furniture items? And how weird does it look if the villagers don't use it? Or alternatively, do we have to rig and program villagers sitting down as a behavior? And how does that affect their movement? Do they want to trade when they're sitting down? Like, all of those little decisions need to be made by the game design team. And from there, think about desert villages which have sandstone everywhere. Like, do we then make furniture out of sandstone as well? Do we just find the nearest wood type? Probably birch. Like, there's a few decisions that need to be made there. Then if villagers can do it, should illagers be able to do it as well? Because they're effectively 2 factions of the same species, more or less. And so do woodland mansions get furniture? Do evokers ever sit down? Kind of thinking about it the same way as, like, does Steve ever sit down? It's like, do evokers do the same? And does this conflict with this sort of existing design philosophy of woodland mansions? Because there aren't any beds in woodland mansions the way there are in villages. They're made out of wall blocks where there needs to be a bedroom or some sort of facsimile of that. And so it feels like you're stepping into something that a player might make if furniture didn't exist in the way that we already have it. I also think, if we're including illagers, then do witch huts need things? Do pillager outposts have chairs? There's a few possibilities there. And then my brain goes a little further afield to stuff like trail ruins. And at that point, it gets a bit more philosophical. Like, does this buried civilization that was a part of Minecraft's past have to present as sophisticated enough to use furniture? Should the furniture have been destroyed by all of the sand and gravel and stuff kind of caving in on it? And does including furniture remove some of the mystery from those structures? Right now, things like trail ruins are very much open to interpretation about how a room would be structured and what it would be used for. But if you put a table and 2 chairs, you think, okay, like a couple is going to be sitting there eating or something like that. And you immediately have more information, which feels good on the surface. But if you're looking at the broader range of how players might want to interpret some of these structures, it leaves them less room for interpretation. And so it's really about what Mojang wants out of each experience. With the archaeology side of things, I think they very much want things to be open to interpretation and slowing down and thinking critically about how some of all of this stuff works. And I don't know if furniture necessarily makes a whole lot of sense in woodland mansions, because although it would be kind of creepy if you walked into a room and all of the evokers and vindicators were all kind of sat down and they all kind of like turned to you in their chairs, like Darth Vader and his pod, But like I do think there's a lot of additional decisions that have to go on top of something that seems like on the surface a very simple. Do we add the ability for players to create chairs they can sit down on? That has knock-on implications that feels like a minor update feature would require a major update level of effort in order to implement it in a way that felt satisfying in a broad sense for Minecraft. So that might be one of the many reasons that they're holding off on adding something that feels like coded in furniture.
And I'll give a quick shout out here to Sticks and Thrones, who also wrote in about furniture in response to episode 376. But they were more concerned about the potential reason why, or one of the reasons why Mojang might not be including furniture. And I'm paraphrasing here. Do you think the reason Mojang hasn't added furniture to Minecraft is because of the 3x3 crafting grid being limited? Do you think Mojang doesn't want to, quote unquote, use up potential patterns of the 3x3 grid with furniture recipes? I don't know if that's necessarily the reason. I think Johnny is probably more in line with what reasons might be for not having furniture in the game. The idea of scope creep. I think the grid is actually pretty versatile in a 3x3. The tables and chairs data pack that I use on the Citadel, that is how you craft the furniture. It's like it's sticks for legs and blocks or slabs for tops or chair bottoms. And then like a vertical stick, to kind of get the back of the chair. Then they just swap out different wood types. So like stripped logs or oak wood types. And that gives you different kinds of chairs, like a decorated chair or a throne, or you put in something like quartz or obsidian, and you get like a darker or a lighter throne, that kind of a thing. And so it's definitely doable in the 3x3 crafting grid, and in a way that makes sense. I mean, sticks for legs and planks for bottoms or tops, I think that makes a lot of sense too. So that kind of stuff I think is pretty solid. I think that the difficult part about implementing them for me in terms of the crafting would be like, you would discover it immediately. So like if you get wood, which is one of the first things you get in the game, you get all these recipes for wood, and then I guess you'd maybe have to collect a stick maybe to get furniture, but like you'd get recipes for chairs before you could even build a house in Minecraft, right? So it would
Yeah.
be a weird kind of way to do that. But to your point about archaeology, a little bit of pushback there, like maybe similar to getting pottery sherds, maybe that's how you get recipes for furniture. Like maybe you don't know how to craft furniture until you discover something like a buried stool or a buried piece of furniture that you just don't understand what it is until you pick it up. I think that could be interesting. I don't know about the villagers. The villagers are not, to me, they don't come across as the brightest. We had an email a couple weeks ago about nitwits. I don't know that stairs and fence posts and pressure plates are really all that out of the realm of what villagers would think would be good for chairs.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
fair.
I'm okay with the players' chairs and stools being more advanced than the villagers. But I think we've mentioned on the show before, a carpenter villager would be really cool,
Hmm.
right? And maybe that's how you could also learn to do furniture. Like I think there's a couple of different ways to implement it and introduce the players to it where it would make sense in the world of Minecraft.
Yeah, and that sort of ties in a little bit to the next email that we have. So we'll roll on into that. This is from Al Reeve, who is a community miner in our Discord, and the subject is a concrete former. Greetings, Johnny and Joel. Building off of the discussion on episode 376 about block variants, as someone who loves to build with colour, it's disappointing to me that more of the neutral tones have gotten stairs and slabs, while concrete has yet to get them. Since I work in construction, I find it strange that with a material you can make almost anything out of, it's restricted to being a block in Minecraft. It would make sense to me to just add concrete to the stone cutter, but what if we get a concrete former? I thought that it could be set up like a furnace, but instead of loading buckets of lava for fuel, the player would load buckets of water for consumption. It could have a setting to set stairs, slabs, or just blocks, and an input for the concrete powder. I think it would be more fun than mining towers of concrete powder and water. Likewise, for terracotta, perhaps a kiln for clay balls or for terracotta variants. What do you think? Alreeve died of frustration trying to make an aesthetic rainbow house.
So similar to the scope creep of furniture, I feel like getting into stairs and slabs of every other block that you really want stairs and slabs in kind of opens that up. So rather than focusing on that, I like the idea of getting stairs and slabs in a way that adds more gameplay. And for me, like the extra complication where you might want to automate this process, let's just assume that the concrete former works in the same way that a furnace does, and that you can have a hopper sending stuff into the top, the back, and removing from the bottom, so that you could have your input and output for your, I don't want to say fuel, but like your catalyst being water to form different things. I think that could be really cool. I think that could be an interesting way to automate the process. Now, I wouldn't want to remove the innovation that is like TNT based concrete machines and that kind of stuff, because those kind of player innovations are just really fun and really cool. And by just having a block or a profession block in Minecraft that kind of does that for you is not great. I guess it would have been at first, but now that if you implement it now, it kind of like negates that kind of player innovation. So I don't know if having concrete blocks be part of it would be a good way to go. But then again, like if you don't make it something that can make concrete blocks, then like it can make a stair, but it can't make a simple cube. So there's some pushback there. But I like the spirit of the email, which is like I don't want to make an easy button. Like I kind of want there to be some level of work, like iron buckets and water and some templates or something maybe that you have to find. Things like that could be really interesting. The terracotta idea with the kiln to me is too similar to a furnace though. And that's where I think like maybe just adding terracotta to a stone cutter would be the better way to go.
Yeah, I see approaches like this a lot in the more realistic mod packs that you get, both from
Yeah.
like in terms of the terracotta kiln and this idea of being able to shape concrete powder into something that you can then set into a concrete version of that block. Like, I feel like there's a balance of value at play here. Is it more valuable to the player if they learn about like real world methods for stuff being made, which we've heard from various folks who've guested on the show in the past, that like learning about bees and the natural processes of that means that younger Minecraft players understand better where the wax that we make into candles comes from and that kind of thing. So there's like genuinely learning moments in terms of like natural processes and construction processes from Minecraft that people can take into the real world, having learned them when they're younger. But I also wonder if it's better to respect players' time by not overcomplicating things, which is why we have like a fixed amount of crafting methods, and there's not like an individual workstation for every single thing. Or in the cases where the workstations get more specialized, it's usually just a faster way of doing something, but it can still be done by the kind of typical furnace. And what the realistic mod packs do is you split things up into, well, in order to get flint, you have to like bang like a rock on another rock until it splits open, and then you get flint from that process instead of just digging it up out of gravel. And then from there, you make flint tools before you can really break anything harder like stone. And there's like a few different additional stages in the process. And I feel like that is in the territory for me where it creates too much dissonance between the gameplay and the aesthetic of Minecraft. Because with this blocky game, it feels strange that the mechanics feel more realistic when you're able to still like jump up a meter-high block when you're moving around and that kind of thing. Like, navigating the environment becomes almost supernatural in the face of how realistic a lot of the other mechanics that they put into the game are, and how much realism really needs to apply when your concrete molding is going to be interrupted with a skeleton shooting at you with fiery arrows. So I think there's a balance to be had here, and I think that's part of why they want to keep crafting relatively simple, and why I would imagine if they implemented stuff like this, it could be its own process. That may even be one of the reasons that they've kept back some of these materials from having variant blocks, is that maybe they want to have that debate internally. Should this be something that we can just stick in a stone cutter like all of the other stone types and craft, or does it deserve to have some different method applied to it since it's an entire family of blocks? I do feel like it's partly a balance of like, how complex do we want to make things and potentially risk alienating people who would love all crafting to happen in just a small handful of interfaces, especially with the pinch on inventory that a lot of people are feeling. And like, I already use a bundle to store like a furnace, a stone cutter, an ender chest, and a crafting table everywhere I go, just so I can have one inventory slot instead of 4 taken up with those workstations. And so I think there's definitely something along those lines that is probably part of the design philosophy, is like, we don't want to create specialized crafting for everything. And the terracotta kiln is the same thing, really. It's like, you know, if we have a smoker and a blast furnace, you can still use a furnace, it just gets stuff done in half the time, and you can get around that by building a furnace array to help you with that. And I think the other benefit to the smoker and the blast furnace is that they're villager workstations. So if you want a terracotta kiln as a functional block like a furnace, then, you know, maybe you bring a potter villager into the equation, and we already get brick and terracotta trades from stonemasons. So unless you move those around and substitute the stonemasons for maybe new stone types that get implemented later, I don't see it being anything other than just a sideways move rather than something that feels kind of new and innovative and interesting.
How would you feel about getting some of these things from villagers, like getting some of the stone stuff or the terracotta stuff from a stonemason instead of crafting it yourself?
I mean, most of the time, it's just in such small quantities right now that you do get it from you can get glazed terracotta and I think dyed terracotta from stonemasons, but there's obviously such a range of colors that if you want a large quantity of it and it's one of the later down on the list kind of trades, then it's sort of it feels easier to just go out to a Badlands with a Haste 1 beacon and mine all of the terracotta yourself. So I think we have the option for some of that stuff already, and it's the kind of thing that with data packs, if people are comfortable doing that, they can put recipes in that, like, you know, the Wandering Trader can give you more stuff, or you can even modify existing villagers if you want to go that route, if you just want the resources from somewhere. But yeah, it's a balance of grind versus a different kind of grind, really, ultimately. And I think maybe some of the more specialized crafting methods might get in the way of that. too much. Moving on to our main discussion for this week, though, we're going to talk a little bit about what we have planned for Mounts of Mayhem now it's in pre-releases. I was wondering if we had any ideas to adopt these new features early on in release. And we've talked a little bit about how this update isn't necessarily for us, but I think setting some of those concerns aside for a minute, we can both have a little bit of a discussion about what about like the Nautilus or the Spear is going to appeal to us in the early stages.
So around my massive mushroom island on the Citadel is coral reef in most directions. And so I think that it might be fun to use the Nautilus to explore that, not just see how far the coral goes, which is difficult to really suss out when you're flying over it at, Mach 12 blocks a second, whatever it is that you do, whatever the speed is for Elytra. So being able to slowly go around and kind of see what's there, maybe find shipwrecks or underground ravines or different areas that might be useful or inspire some sort of build. I think using the Nautilus would be great for that rather than having to surface all the time to breathe. So I wouldn't necessarily be using it for speed of transportation. It would be more for like just being able to get around and look at stuff. So that could be a cool way to do that. I may also want to harvest some of the coral. I want to build with more color in this area. And depending on what the debuff is for the mining when you're sitting on the back of a Nautilus, if coral is soft enough, it might not matter, especially if I'm close enough to a beacon, which I might move to the ocean, or I could move to the closest edge of the shore and then mine from there. So there's some possibilities there. Or I could just set up a conduit, depending on like what's easier. I don't know whether like exploring and mining with a conduit nearby would be better than having like riding a Nautilus, or do I do both? Like I don't know what the best idea would be. There's also two ocean monuments that are relatively close to one another that might require some exploring and block measuring and things like that. It could be worth it to set up a double farm at the ocean monuments, and so maybe a Nautilus would help with that as well. I don't know whether a Nautilus would be useful for fighting Guardians. Like I've never, it's been a long time since I've attempted to raid an ocean monument. So bringing a Nautilus around for that raid, if nothing else, it might be a speedier retreat. Like if you need to get on it and book it, then like that might be a good way to get away, get out of range. Certainly get out of an incoming laser blast from a Guardian. That dash attack on the Nautilus as a dodge might actually be quite useful. I'm not sure how accurate the Guardians would be at that point. So again, it's something to explore. So that's something I might be using a Nautilus for coming up in Mounts of Mayhem.
Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit about it, and the more I think about it, the more I think it is possible. At first, I was like, I don't like taking mobs into ocean monuments with me. It's the same with the axolotl thing. It's the fact that Guardians respawn infinitely, and whatever mount you've brought in with you is finite. Mount or helper or whatever, like they're not always going to make it out of there alive, and it depends how attached to the thing you are in the first place. But as a getaway vehicle, that's a different story. I like that idea, and being able to kind of swim around the entrance and kind of break line of sight from all of those Guardian lasers, whilst also not having to worry about chugging your water-breathing potion until you're in the structure, I think that's maybe got some potential to it. So that does sound like a fun idea. At the very least, if you're clearing out the structure afterwards and you want to be able to kind of like freely swim around the middle of the monument, I think there's some possibilities there. And I believe Guardians don't spawn underneath the legs of an ocean monument. So if you want to like duck down there with a Nautilus to start with and make that your entry point, then potentially it stays out of harm's way for a little bit longer. But yeah, the Nautilus could be an interesting help with that kind of stuff. I am also curious to find the coral Nautilus. Like I think that's probably the most interesting one out of the whole set for me. I'm also kind of interested in obtaining Nautilus armor, and not necessarily just because of the aesthetic things, just as like one of those little collect 'em ups, gotta have them all kind of ideas where I've got all of the horse armor. I still keep the stuff, even though I rarely ride horses. It's just one of those loot items that feels interesting and collectible and could maybe look good on a shelf or in an item frame somewhere. So I kind of like the idea of having that just to add it to the trophy cabinet more than to kind of arm my fleet of Nautili as I kind of explore the oceans. I haven't spent a ton of time around water personally lately, so I feel like if I'm going to be using the Nautilus, I want to, establish some sort of harbor build or underwater base or something like that and use it for some of the more kind of base building qualities to it, which I'm still kind of hoping for refinements in future that allow the Nautilus to, the Nautilus rider, rather, to mine blocks at a reasonable speed. But even then, I think there's a case to be made for just being able to explore it with a slightly different kind of viewpoint and get around a little bit more easily, or design infrastructure that works for the Nautilus in the same way that I've been designing storage that works for the Copper Golem lately. So I think there's room in my heart for a Nautilus or two once Mounts of Mayhem gets into gear.
What about the spear? Any plans for the spear?
See, I think the spear is probably the feature I interact with first and possibly most. And that's mainly because it's craftable, so there's less of like the hide and seek kind of element of finding a Nautilus to begin with. Like if you just craft a spear as soon as you have the recipe for one, then you've got that around for a while. I have some netherite lying around as well, so I have no qualms whatsoever with like upgrading it to netherite immediately and having one that will last me for a while, especially now the durability impact of lunge is minimal. Considering, I think, that the Windy City is going to feature a lot of like wind charge launchers and vertical design to it, I was thinking if I add the lunge kind of air dash ability into that, that's also going to be something that could impact how I get around the structures that I'm building. And so I kind of like the idea of including a spear in my loadout more as I'm traveling around the city and building, if not necessarily routes specifically for this, like maybe options and shortcuts and stuff like that will be a neat way of getting around the environment. I wouldn't want to be unable to get somewhere without it, but I like the idea of, if I hit this wind charge launcher and dash over that rooftop, I can kind of cut the corner off on these sort of like upper skyways to the city that I'm building or something like that. So I like the idea of being able to use it for movement more than I like the idea of using it for combat. I'm in a single player world with, PvE that I rarely interact with unless I want it to, farm a certain resource or something like that. So I think if anything, I'm going to be using the spear for what I see as its more utility purpose than its combat purpose. And for that, I'm kind of excited for the spear. I think that's going to be the thing that I'm probably most likely to interact with in, future Minecraft updates when things like the Nautilus and the camel husk seem like they're fairly ordinary at that point.
Yeah, I don't have any plans for the spear, partially because of course I'm building in a sci-fi area now, so I don't really see much use for it as it stands unless there's any changes that come to it. We've talked before about having it being used in dispensers, but that doesn't appear to be a thing, so I don't really have any ideas about how to incorporate it into the sci-fi area. I'm also just not particularly interested in it because, as you said, like I don't deal with PvE in my world very much either, although I did get into the trial chamber this week and that was interesting. So I explore a use for it there, but I don't really see it. However, if I was to rewind and if Mounts of Mayhem came out while I was still building in Westhill, then I could see myself using the spear with the armor poser mod quite a bit. You could have it as a suit of armor holding a spear as a decoration. You could have it as a coat of arms with like two crossed spears, something that I've done with swords in Westhill. I could have it just leaning up against the wall in a blacksmith shop, which I did with a shield that was used to great effect. Also, something that I struggled with was using the tiny version of the armor stands in the armor poser mod to create signs. Things like putting a potion on a apothecary sign or a pork chop on a butcher sign. And I found that the ASCII kind of characters for arrows are not great, and they don't translate well to signs in Minecraft. So using a wooden spear or a stone spear as an arrow on a sign, because I've used an armor stand mod with it, would also be really, really cool and would fit Minecraft because, of course, it looks like a little pixelated graphic. Like, it doesn't look like something too modern, which was some of the problems with using some of the characters that you can copy and paste into signs, is that sometimes the resolution is too high. And so it just looks something like it's really out of place, like a modern typeface character on a Minecraft sign looks a little bit strange sometimes. So those would be my ideas for spears, but nothing really vanilla. Like, I don't have any ideas from a vanilla standpoint for them because I just don't have a use for them. And so I think they're very much a niche addition in terms of the vanilla game.
Yeah, I'm curious, now that I've got this double zombie spawner potential drown farm in mind, if I end up using the spear there because it's an alternative to Sweeping Edge. Because with a jab attack, you can hit multiple targets, and the same is true of the charge, but I think just standing there and jabbing would make sense. And the spear does have the option to have looting on it, like looting sharpness, like a few of the pre-existing sword enchantments that were previously exclusive to the sword also work on the spear. So I like the idea of potentially having that as an option, not putting a lunge on that spear, and using it more as a mob farming implement. So I might report back in future about how successful that is, because that seems like not only something that is going to be a change to the possibilities for mob farming, also means you can build something like a mob farm on Bedrock Edition without having to employ a trident killer as the killing mechanism. So there might be something that feels version agnostic, edition agnostic as far as the weaponry in Minecraft goes. The other thing really to talk about is the new mounts. And I think as far as the camel husk goes, and I'm kind of including the parched as part and parcel of that because they're very much in the same location, I don't think I'm likely to run into them anytime soon unless I'm mining a bunch of sand for TNT or for concrete powder or something like that, which, going back to our email, might be more likely if they decide that the next update is going to be all about concrete. But I don't have a ton of reasons to go to a desert. I'm not building in deserts right now. A lot of the stuff I'm building in is more kind of like green and leafy biomes. So if I decide to go and build a desert civilization somewhere, then there's a possibility. But I think camel husks are fairly low on my priority list, as are regular camels. And that's because I'm playing in a single-player world. I don't have the possibility of using the camel as a two-player mount. You can't get anything else to mount a camel. So I, for the most part, don't really interact with camels all that much right now. They're great as far as like flavor for the area goes. I think they're great to have as a mob that exists in deserts and makes deserts feel more like deserts from the real world. But I don't really see myself interacting with those until I, forget to sleep whilst I'm mining out this next layer of sand and suddenly one is bearing down on me with a pair of riders.
I actually will be spending some time, I think, in a Badlands and a desert. There's a large desert to the south and southeast of the Mushroom Island, and there's a pretty sizable Badlands just to the south, where I've already set up a small terracotta mining setup because I wanted more cyan terracotta, and I needed to get just more basic terracotta to dye it. And one of the habits that I've developed, of course, is like not needing to sleep until it's well after dark on the Mushroom Island because just nothing's going to happen. So I can see myself having my guard down and spending a lot of time mining up sand or terracotta and going like, oh crap, it's dark, I should probably sleep. And then maybe running into parched or a camel husk or something like that. If I do, it'll be more for research for the show. Just like, oh, okay, cool. That's how they exist. And that's how I deal with them at endgame. And like, that would be it. But I don't see myself using them for anything. But I can see myself running into them sooner than later because because of the sci-fi area, glass and concrete and terracotta are probably going to be pretty high use blocks. So I can see myself running into them. As far as the zombie horse goes, while I do have some biomes around that they might spawn in, given how rare they seem to be from yourself and other people that reported it, I doubt I'll ever see one, and certainly don't have a use for the zombie horse. I mean, I guess if I wanted to kidnap one and use it as some sort of alien in the sci-fi area, but like I don't, because Minecraft doesn't really give us that, and I'm not the biggest fan of like Minecraft organic builds at the scale that I would want to build them looking very good. So like I can't see myself adding any fauna to my alien world in that way because everything is just going to look like a Minecraft animal unless I did some sort of reskin. And that could be a unique way to have something on the server where the zombie horse maybe looks like some sort of alien, but then it's not going to affect hardly anybody else on the server if they have the same texture pack because the chances of them seeing one are so slim. Like it's not going to affect a horse or a cow or a pig if they run into it in like their medieval build or spawn or something like that, right?
Yeah, I think honestly, if you wanted to go with incorporating mobs in a sci-fi area, the Nautilus doesn't seem too out of place as like the pilot of some little like typical flying saucer UFO style alien. I can imagine something along those lines. But yeah, like I think zombie horses are ones that I'll probably just run into eventually because I'm spending a lot of time around plains biomes, and so I can see myself taming one just for the novelty. And I do think they look all right with some of the armor, including the new netherite horse armor, which is another one of those things that, since we're not going to be able to just find it, you do have to upgrade it from the diamond one. I expect I will craft one of those, and probably only one ever, because I don't really see the need for them otherwise. And I can see myself taming a zombie horse for the novelty, equipping it with netherite horse armor, and maybe riding it around a little bit. But the thing about the zombie horses is if you're not quick to tame them during the night and equip them with horse armor shortly afterwards, they're going to burn in the sun. So the majority of the time I expect players, even coming up from caving expeditions where there's still a few like creepers and spiders loaded into the chunks around you, you will probably not find a zombie horse. You're going to have to go out at nighttime to really encounter them. So it's going to be interesting to see how frequently they show up in gameplay. That said, I have spent a lot of time in the area that I'm in right now, so the local difficulty is going to be really high. So if their spawn rate is tied to local difficulty, I'm going to be seeing them sooner or later. So I imagine they will show up as part of my gameplay every so often. I think maybe I will circle back around to ideas like the Parched. Like, I think they have a bit of potential, and like a few other folks in our community have been saying, it's kind of strange that they don't show up more in other places now that we have trial spawners that can spawn strays and bogged in addition to regular skeletons. I imagine that's some stuff that will feel like refinements to these features can come later, and all of the little extra stuff that isn't in scope for this drop but might be, something that they can tweak about things in future. I expect we might find Parched popping up in trial spawners and occasional areas like that where you wouldn't expect them otherwise. For now, folks, that is where we're going to wrap up this discussion and this episode of The Spawn Chunks. So you can find more information about our show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every Monday. You can also join our Hangouts, the next of which is going to be on the 29th, where you'll be able to share what you've been up to in Minecraft over the last month or so. We currently have 269 patrons, which is steady on from last week. We would love to welcome more people into the fold as we wrap up 2025. Special thanks, as always, go out to our content engineers, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. And we'd also like to give a one-time shout-out to our new annual memberships from Interlati, K-User Rider 2020, Mr. E-Machine, and Zarathin. Thank you so much for signing up for an annual membership.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. It's free. Just tell a friend about the Spawn Chunks and where they can go to listen to it. You can find new episodes of the Spawn Chunks on your favorite podcasting players, wherever you find them. You can also get the YouTube version. You can get the Spotify version. There's videos across the board. You can find the Spawn Chunks on social media, which makes it very easy to share. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is on the spawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can watch or listen to the render distance, because we do offer it in video now. That's the extended version of the program.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, doing behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series. I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, now in full swing for Season 11. You can find us through a quick YouTube search. And aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
I will point you towards the Citadel Cafe, which is my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. We are coming up on episode 500, so we are making plans for that. It might have a crossover with our annual holiday episode where I have a bunch of guests on, so look forward to that in the next couple of weeks. I'm Joel Duggan on social media and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream every Tuesday through Friday at 9 o'clock Atlantic, and then on Saturdays it's 1 p.m. So lots happening over on the Sci-Fi Island. And there's a new Lego build coming in December, depending on when Amazon delivers, so you can look forward to that too.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and here comes the villager with a steel chair!